Hello again, this is Preheat. Welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. So Fire Mage was not far off before the buffs, and now is a force to be reckoned with, and it can even contend with Arcane and Frost in Mythic Plus and in Raid. So today we're going to be covering everything you need to know about Fire Mage for Season 1 of The War Within. I'll be explaining things in a way that even new players can understand, using the experience I've gained from my one-on-one coaching sessions. Speaking of coaching, this video is sponsored by Metafy. If you're looking to join other like-minded players, check out my new group on Metafy. Joining is free, but there are also various tiers that come with exclusive benefits like log reviews, early access to videos like this, UI improvements, special shoutouts, and coaching discounts. You can always find a lot of free resources for how to play your class in World of Warcraft, but if you're looking for a one-on-one conversation with someone who can get to the bottom of what your problems are and how to resolve those issues, I also offer coaching. I'm proud to say that I'm still the #1 coach for World of Warcraft, 6 months plus running, and I intend to keep this streak going. Right now, I'm preparing an exclusive series of boss deep dives I'll be releasing soon to anyone who's signed up. Follow the link in the description if you're interested and sign up for whatever tier works best for you. All of them will have access to the boss deep dive series that is coming soon. I appreciate you, and I'm excited to connect deeper in our group. So now on to the rest of the video. So on the most basic level, Fire Mage is about 3 main things. We want to convert and spin hot streaks, which are buffs that make our Pyroblast and Flamestrike instant cast and deal more damage with Ignite. We also want to have as much combustion uptime as possible. That's going to be our damage buff that makes every spell crit. So it's very good since a lot of our spells work off of crits. And also we don't want to waste procs, and sometimes that's going to be inevitable because Fire Mage has a ton of proc abilities and just random things that will pop up and give us buffs like Hyperthermia, Combustion, and other things we'll discuss later. But we essentially want to spend our resources whenever we get them. Sometimes we will pool them because we have a combustion coming up, so more damage is coming up soon. In that case, we want to make sure we get full use out of that combustion. But generally speaking, we just want to send everything as we get it, unless something is coming up soon where we'd have to save because of just the randomness. There's so much randomness in the amount of procs you're going to get. It just is too much if you don't spend wisely early on. If you're aggressive enough about how you spend, you'll end up overcapping on your resources, which will waste your procs. It's just as bad as losing the procs and not having them when you need it if you just sit on them and don't use them. The spells highlighted here are the builder spells. These are the spells that we primarily use to generate Hot Streak and heating up. And the spells here are the spenders, and it's just Flamestrike and Pyroblast. Those are the 2 abilities we use to spin our Hot Streaks. So Fire Mage has a couple spells in order to build those crits up. Our most basic one, the one that we'll be using last if we run out of everything else, is Fireball. Fireball is just a cast time. It does have a chance to crit, but it revs up over time. So if we don't get a crit with Fireball, eventually we will end up with one with Pyrotechnics, the talent we take in pretty much every case where we're doing damage outside of AOE. It's not a very good spell though, and we try to avoid casting the spell as much as possible unless we're setting up for something like a Combustion. Now, as you can see here, my chance to crit with Fireball is pretty low. I'll pretty much never get 2 crits in a row just naturally, and that's where our second spell comes into play, Fire Blast. You can see my charges of Fire Blast here. Whenever we get a heating up, we can press the Fire Blast during our cast, and that will instantly convert our heating up into a hot streak, allowing us to follow up with the Pyroblast. Pyroblast is a really long cast time, and you don't want to be hard casting it normally unless you're playing certain talents. But this is a spell that we will be using a lot, just instant casts. It does a lot of damage, and typically we're going to be using this thing in single target and in AoE up to 4 targets. At 5 targets, if we're playing the Flamestrike build, then we would no longer spend on Pyroblast. Instead, we would use Flamestrike. Flamestrike is basically the same idea, super long cast time, does decent damage, but obviously we don't want to be wasting all the time casting the spell when we can instead cast it instantly with a hot streak. Again, the target count for this is 5 or more is going to be Flamestrike, and below 5 you want to use Pyroblast. They're actually even at 4, but since it's even, it's always going to be better to attack whichever target is the most threatening. In addition to this, we also have some other spells. So Phoenix Flame is instant cast, has charges here, but is guaranteed to crit. So if we Phoenix Flame, we are going to crit, and that is really, really important because we are going to be using Phoenix Flame a lot to generate hot streaks. It is a great source of crits, and we actually use this outside of Combustion too now because we want to basically have as high of number of hot streaks over the fight as we can, and the best way to do that is to just use as many guaranteed crits as possible, so long as we actually have them still for whenever we need them. The last 2 fire spells we should cover are Scorch and Dragon's Breath. So Scorch is just a castle moving spell. This spell is unremarkable. It does basically no damage. It's not really something you ever really want to be casting. If you are using Scorch on the move to try and maneuver, that is probably going to be a huge DPS loss. You should just have better movement, use Shimmer better, use the instant cast you have. But Scorch comes online in Execute because below 30% HP, Scorch has a 100% chance to crit, and it also deals more damage and also applies other buffs if we have other talents for it. So Scorch is something that we reserve only for Execute. It is really, really good for getting crits whenever the boss reaches 30%, but before that, you really want to avoid pressing this ability unless there's a specific reason that you should that we'll outline later in the video. Our last fire spell is one that's available to all mages, but I still feel like I should mention it, Dragon's Breath. So Dragon's Breath is a stop spell, which means it stops mobs that would normally be uninterruptible whenever they're doing their cast. It's great for crowd control, and also there are talents we can pick up to make Dragon's Breath better, but we don't typically pick up those talents. As Fire Mage, our main cooldown is Combustion. This spell makes all of our spells crit. It can be cast while we're casting, so we always want to lead into it with a spell already ready to go. And we want to fit as many spells into this Combustion as possible, ideally generating as many hot streaks as possible. It also converts our stats and gives us other buffs, so it has a lot of other benefits. And the cooldown on Combustion is reduced. It says 2 minutes there, but we do have talents that reduce the cooldown further, like Kindling, which makes it so that all of our crits reduce the cooldown, and also Unleash Inferno, which we play as Sunfury, which further increases the cooldown reduction and gives us more damage during Combustion. When I talk about resources, I'm referring to our charges of Phoenix Flame and Fire Blast. Those are the primary resources that we are spending during Combustion to alternate and get those Pyroblast off. So this is kind of a sample sequence here. If you're already inside your Combustion, you could Pyroblast, Fire Blast to get a hot streak again, Pyroblast again, alternate those, and then use Phoenix Flames as well. But the actual priority for Combustion is listed on my Wowhead guide. You can check it out here. It says the below casts are used to generate hot streak, right? So obviously spinning it's the highest priority. But below that we have using Phoenix Flame if we have the Flame's Fury buff, which we get from our Capstone talent. This makes our Phoenix Flame deal double damage. Below that we have using Scorch if we have improved Scorch and like Execute so that we keep this buff up. That's if it's about to fall off, but only if it's about to fall off. And then otherwise we would cast Fire Blast or we would cast Phoenix Flame as our second to last resort. And then our actual last resort is going to be Scorch, because Scorch and Combustion will always crit. This is something that we can use if we have to, but we want to generally avoid getting down to the very bottom here unless we have completely cashed out of all of our Phoenix Flames and all of our Fire Blasts. I should mention that there is no set order to Combustion. There will be a lot of different variants depending on what sort of procs you get and what the situation is, but just follow this priority and you should get the most damage out of Combustion. And keep in mind, this isn't just for your main Combustion. This also goes towards your time anomaly combustions, the random proc combustions you get whenever you just are casting spells and it just suddenly your character catches on fire. Typically, whenever we set for Combustion, we want to have a heating up or hot streak prepped, and then we want to be casting a fireball as we enter it. That way we can get as many spells off as possible like we talked about. Now, during the Combustion phase, you're basically just alternating between any of the resources that you have. You're trying to spend all of your resources as quickly as possible. And then outside of Combustion, we still will be spending them, but we want to bank them leading into the next Combustion. Whenever all of our spells are on cooldown, we also have another cooldown we should mention, which is Shifting Power. This is an ability that makes our cooldowns come up faster, so we want to be using Shifting Power whenever Combustion is a ways out. The exact number is 17 or more seconds. And we also want to be using it whenever we are out of Fire Blast, because it is a very, very good tool to get those Fire Blasts back and also the Phoenix Flames back as well. If you are going to cap out on Fire Blast while you're shifting powering, which is very common, you almost always get at least one extra if you have a lot of haste. It is good to press Fire Blast while you're in your shifting power in order to not cap out. Also, going into shifting power, make sure that you have only a heating up. That way, if you do need to spend that Fire Blast during shifting power, which you probably will, you will get a hot streak out of it instead of wasting the Fire Blast. In addition to that, we have a lot of other utility spells, and I'm not going to mention all of them. You can go check out my Wowhead guide for more information, but one that we need to talk about is Mirror Image. The biggest benefit of Mirror Image is not listed in the tooltip. Whenever we use Mirror Image, not only do we get these cool guys who look like us who hang out with us, we also have 0 threat. This is a negative 90 million threat modifier as long as our homies are out here. So as long as these guys are persisting, we will not get threat of the mobs, no matter how hard we try. And this is really, really great, especially in Mythic Plus, because during the weird, awkward phase, whenever the tank is gathering everything up, we can just go crazy while everyone else is waiting so that they don't pull threat. And we don't have to worry about that threat at all. Now, once your mirrors go away, that threat will come surging back to you. But of course, we can use another spell in our arsenal, Greater Invisibility, to instantly get rid of that threat. Typically, you don't have to, because at this point, the tank will have threat. Greater Invisibility makes us invisible. It makes us leave combat if that's possible for us in that moment. and it also makes us take reduced damage as well. There's also a lot of spells that if they're going off on you, Greater Invisibility will stop from completing because the boss loses its target. When it comes to stats for Fire Mage, generally speaking, haste is going to be your best stat. You would think it would be Critical Strike because Fire Mage wants to crit a lot, but we actually have a lot of guaranteed ways to crit already. It's not necessarily a bad stat, but it's definitely not our best. Haste allows us to get as many spells out as possible during our combustion windows, and also to get as many overlapping ignites from our mastery as possible. So it's a really, really great stat, but it isn't infallible. There is a point where you will probably want other stats as well. Typically, I see this whenever you're reaching about where the diminishing returns are for haste, which I'm just on the cusp of right here. So our next best stat is probably going to be mastery. Obviously, you should sim your own character if you want to know what your best stats are, because every character might be different. But generally speaking, mastery is going to be your best second stat. Mastery applies a damage over time whenever we deal damage with our fire spells. And we can actually build up that ignite on a single target, and we can spread it to nearby targets to deal more damage in AoE. Now, in addition to our mastery number, we also get conversion from critical strike to mastery during our combustion through improved combustion. So 75% of our critical strike chance, which would normally be worthless if we're guaranteed to crit inside of our cooldown for combustion, is going to be turned into mastery. So that's why it's not necessarily a terrible stat. It's just not one of the best stats. And you definitely need to sim your own character using raid bots. Look at your top gear to figure out which pieces of gear and which stats and enchants are going to be best for you. All right, so what we're looking at here is the single target and also raid talents for Fire Mage. So we're going to be playing Sunfury, just in pretty much every case. Frostfire is not terrible, but it is behind numerically, and there's really no reason to add all the additional complexity of Frostfire to the spec if you're just going to be doing less damage anyways. So Sunfury is the way to go for now. Obviously, by the time you watch this video, it could be different. But the big thing about Sunfury that you need to be aware of is the Spellfire Spheres, which we only get from consuming Hot Streak. This instantly incentivizes us to consume and to generate as much Hot Streak as possible. So this means talents in the past that might have been useful, like Meteor, that don't really contribute or consume any sort of hot streak. They don't have any tie-in to Spellfire Spheres. Those are going to be inherently at a disadvantage when it comes to the rest of our kit. Whenever we generate a Spellfire Sphere, it doesn't change how we play at all, but we will get a damage buff with Burden of Power. It's just 15% more damage on our next Pyroblast, but for Flamestrike, it's 60% more damage, so that's actually notable. And then once we consume Burden of Power, we get Glorious Incandescence, which is going to cause a bunch of meteors to fall, and it also gives us cooldown reduction on Fire Blast. So if you see that you have the Glorious Incandescence buff, make sure that you consume it before it falls off. Same goes for Burden of Power. It'd be really bad if you had these buffs and you just let them expire without using them because you're just wasting potential damage. But usually you kind of have to go out of your way to have that happen. But Glorious Incandescence can be seen as just like an additional Fire Blast charge. Obviously, the cooldown on Fire Blast is depending on if you're in Combustion or not because of Fiery Rush. So, it can be variable. It also depends on your haste as well. But yeah, that's the gist of it here. We have some other stuff too. So Memory of Alar is going to give us Hyperthermia every time we exit Combustion. And this is very predictable, right? You can see how long you have left on Combustion. Once Combustion is over with, Memory of Alar is going to activate and we get Hyperthermia, and we can basically machine gun Pyroblasts or Flame Strikes. And those all have no cast time, and they are all guaranteed to critically strike. On that note, we also have Hyperthermia as a talent, and this should only proc whenever Combustion is not active, but it is possible to have Combustion up at the same time as Hyperthermia. So during Hyperthermia, we basically just want to mash our Pyroblast or Flamestrike, but we will sometimes throw in a Fire Blast so long as it gives us a hot streak, because it's every other that we're going to have a hot streak, right? Hyperthermia makes Pyroblast instant cast, it makes it always crit, but it does not make every Pyroblast a hot streak. So during Hyperthermia, if we're going to cap out on Fire Blast, or if we're about to lose our Glorious Incandescence, or if we're trying to keep our field of burn up, we can spin at least one Fire Blast during the Hyperthermia. I usually try not to spend more than one though. During Hyperthermia, we'll just weave in a Fire Blast in there just so that we get another hot streak, right? So you would get a hot streak, you would spin the hot streak, you would Fire Blast, and then on your next instant cast Pyroblast you were going to cast anyways, that would be a hot streak instead. Sometimes we will ignore Hyperthermia because Combustion comes up. So if Combustion is coming up soon and you're currently in a Hyperthermia, what you're going to want to do is generate the hot streak from Hyperthermia. So, you just press the Pyroblast, so you have the hot streak buff available, and then you begin casting a Fireball if you're not in Execute. So if you're above 30%, you would begin casting a Fireball, and you would actually do the Combustion sequence like while Hyperthermia is up. You wouldn't want to just go straight into Combustion during Hyperthermia. It's more important to cast 2 spells into it always, because we want to have as many spells in our Combustion as possible because of Unleashed Inferno. So sometimes you will find it a little odd, but you will be casting fireballs into your combustion, even if you're in hyperthermia. By the way, if you're below 30%, you'd cast Scorch instead. And that's just like generally a rule, right? If you're ever going to go into combustion, you want to cast a spell into your combustion and have a hot streak to spin as soon as your spell ends so that both the spells fire off at the same time. And then they return a hot streak, and then you can use another hot streak, right? Because you instantly get it back. So yeah, it's going to be a Scorch and execute. It's going to be a fireball otherwise, but that's the general idea here. But these talents are pretty much locked in. There's not really a case for SKB, so just don't even worry about it. We're free of this curse, so we don't have to play this anymore. You would play it if you played Frostfire, but we're not playing that. And then when it comes to talent swaps, so like let's say I want to go do Mythic Plus, and I don't necessarily want to go in just doing the Ignite build. I want to actually have good damage in Mythic Plus. Since they buffed Flamestrike a bunch of times, Flamestrike is actually pretty good in Mythic Plus now. I recommend this up here. So you're just subbing out the point in Ashen Feather, which is only good in single target. You're subbing out the extra execute damage. You're subbing out Pyrotechnics, which is a pretty low impact talent. Doesn't really do much to change your damage. And you're subbing in Majesty of the Phoenix, which is just more Flamestrike damage. Try to have this buff up if you have Burden of Power, because that's 60%, and then this is an additional 20%. You can play around this a little bit if you want. I try to always like alternate it so that I basically have like a Phoenix Flame every 2 Flame Strikes, but it isn't something that you want to like hold your Phoenix Flames for if you don't have another way to generate a hot streak, right? It's just something to think about if you have Fire Blast available or another way to get guaranteed crits. And then obviously Mark of the Fire Lord is just like passive mastery. Now we don't take Living Bomb right now, it's just undertuned, but by the time you watch this, that could be different. They could actually buff the heck out of Lit Fuse. But the problem with Living Bomb is that you need a bunch of talents in order to make it come online. You need Lit Fuse, you need Explosive Ingenuity, and then most importantly, you need Explosivo and Blast Zone. And these are capstones, and they take 2 points into Fire Ire to even get down here. So you're going to have to give something up, and it's probably going to be a lot of single target damage you would lose, because you'd likely just drop Hyperthermia, Pyromaniac, and Fevered Incantation. It's just not worth it right now, but obviously in the future, if it ends up being worth it, I'll make sure to include it in the Fire Guide. Also, just a quick note on these single target talents. You might sim your character and find that Heat Shimmer is showing up slightly better, but that talent is not very good in AoE, and this Master of the Flame is purely passive. Like, we don't have to play around it at all. It's better in AoE. It's basically the same in single target. Why would you bend over backwards and have to do all this extra stuff and all of these extra calculations for what spell to do in Combustion when, and just making it a lot harder for yourself for this talent when it's not even really worth it damage-wise? So I would just avoid this talent completely. It can be nice for mobility, but we already have such good mobility that I just feel like it's not really worth it to pick. So I've been taking this one out of all my builds. Don't recommend Heat Shimmer at all. Just lock in Master of Flame, forget about it. It's basically the same damage, and if there's ever any more targets, well, guess what? You get even more damage, so that's great. On the class side, obviously, we've got like a lot of talent picks for utility. If you're doing Mythic Plus, you probably want Blast Wave, you probably want Decurse, you probably want to stop here. I mean, so this is not set in stone, right? This is the raid build, so obviously we don't have those included, but I'll swap over to Mythic Plus. So yeah, Spell Steal is pretty good. Obviously, if there's spells to steal, if there aren't, then it's not very good. Yeah, I mean, just kind of pick whatever you want here, but make sure you have the throughput talents. So that's going to be stuff like Time Anomaly, very important. Both of the Tome talents, very, very important. Shifting Power, Overflowing Energy. Also, one notable talent is Energized Barriers. This thing is actually kind of crazy. So whenever you cast your barrier, it removes snares. There's a lot of abilities that deal damage to you that are very deadly, that are considered snares, and you can just pop them instantly with your own barrier cast, right? So best example of this is Brood Twister Overnax. Whenever you get the little web on you, normally you have to run out and get dispelled by a healer. You can just press your barrier and it gets rid of it instantly. If you don't have your barrier up, you can press Mass Barrier instead if you aren't saving that for a specific mechanic. So yeah, that's just a lot of utility. Also, another one I should mention is Master of Time. So whenever you alter time, which is, by the way, criminally underrated, crazy, crazy defensive, right? Instantly can heal up your health. This could be like a 5 million heal if you have that much health. Whenever you press it and you reactivate it, you get a blink back. Okay, so Master of Time, if you're ever in a pinch and you need to shimmer and you don't have a shimmer charge, you can just instantly alter time twice and get that blink. But obviously, alter time is such an amazing tool that you probably want to make use of it for defensive capabilities. I'm just saying this, just in case of an emergency, you can use it this way. And then Ice Block is something that a lot of mages are used to. This is just like a pure immunity, but if we take the Ice Cold talent, it turns it into just a very, very strong defensive that we can cast while casting. And it's just 70% reduction. So it is less than an Ice Block, but we can continue casting during it. And a lot of the modifiers for it will still affect it, like the healing and the cooldown reduction. So this is just like a generally good talent, but it's also situational because sometimes having a hard immunity is just way more important. When it comes to our tier bonus, it's not numerically very strong, but it's definitely worth picking up just because you want every bit of damage you can possibly get, and it's very easy with the Catalyst system. And also the fact that you get a free piece of tier whenever you kill the in-boss on Heroic or get a certain Mythic Plus score. So make sure you shoot for that 4-piece. It's just going to beef up our Phoenix Flame. It's going to give it more damage, especially to the primary target. And it's also going to give Phoenix Flame this other property where whenever we use it, we have a chance to get cooldown reduction on it, which just means we get more Phoenix Flames, right? Even better. And also, we get more spell damage. This is a tooltip error, though, so note that it says 1% of the cooldown reduction. It's actually more like 50%. Not really sure why they haven't fixed this tooltip yet, but just be aware that this is off. When it comes to trinkets, we want the same trinket every caster wants, which is Spy Master's Web. So the way that this trinket works is it builds up stacks, and while it builds those up, it's just a passive stat stick. So we want to have those stacks in our bank as long as we can, but we want to spend it whenever it reaches 40 stacks. So typically this is reserved for a Combustion Execute or something like that. But since it takes around 4 to 5 minutes for this thing to fully rev up, if the fight is going really, really long, we may actually have multiple uses of it. So we might just send it at max stacks in a Combustion earlier on, and then have it back up later for Combustion. If that's going to be an Execute, you know, let's say 4 minutes from now, we could get another use out of it. So you just kind of want to play around it smart. Whenever it comes to Mythic Plus, I mean, if you die, you lose your stacks, right? So if you ever see your tank do something really crazy, just pull a bunch of extra mobs and it looks like it's maybe GG, make sure to just send it. Maybe the extra damage will help you not wipe, and if you die, then at least you didn't lose your stacks, right? So that's kind of how I play the Mythic Plus, or I'll maybe save it for like a huge pull, right? If we're like popping Lust and everything, just so I can have crazy damage and absolutely delete the pack. But that's generally the idea with it. Definitely try to get your hands on this thing. It is crazy strong. And then below that in the A tier, we have the Sack Brood and the Treacherous Transmitter. Both very good, but obviously we have other options as well. The Transmitter is kind of annoying to use, but one tip I have for you is since the buff lasts 15 seconds and you don't have to activate it right away, you can actually activate your Treacherous Transmitter before combat. So like before the boss is pulled, you can get it right up to the prerequisite, because it's either going to have you do like 3 jumps, or it's going to have you chase down the sphere, or like stand in a spot. So that way you can have it set up ahead of time. Right before the pull, you activate it, you get the buff. And that way your next Treacherous Transmitter comes up sooner, because the cooldown actually starts whenever you initially activate it. If you don't want this hassle, I recommend Sack Brood. That's why it's higher on the tier list, just because it doesn't have the weird double on use effect. It doesn't have you like running into fire to go catch your orb or anything stupid like that. Sack Brood is just generally good, so definitely get your hands on this thing. We love haste. It gives us haste. We love primary stat. It gives us primary stat. It's decent damage. It's just great all around. I do want to mention the Candle Confidant. So I do have this in A tier simply because in single target it seems really, really high, and a lot of players have this thing. It's a little harder to get on Hero Trek, but this is from Delves. I do not recommend this trinket in Mythic Plus. I don't recommend it if there's ever more than one boss. The AI on the little candle guys who go around and do the melees and, you know, cause a lot of this damage is really bad. So I'm not going to say it's sim bait, because this trinket does sim pretty well if there's just like one boss and the little candles don't get lost. But if there's a lot going on, the AI on this thing will troll you just a little bit. And then obviously we also have just like passive stat trinkets like Unbound Changeling, Empowered Crystal. Those are pretty good. Obviously, if you want more context, you can just go check out Blood Mallet. They have all of the trinkets on the sim. And obviously these are all compared against each other just using the one trinket. So, you know, we don't have like the double on use tax here. But Transmitter is really good, right? This is single target. If we bump it up to, let's say, 5 targets, right, you might see the thing shake up a little bit. So obviously Transmitter is still very, very strong there, but you can see the passive trinkets are pretty good. And the candle is like way down here in AoE. So yeah, that's definitely a mark against it. But you don't really get to choose your trinkets. So, you know, you just got to run with whatever is best for you in whatever situation. So I recommend having a Spy Masters in a passive, or using like Spy Masters Transmitter. And if you don't have Spy Masters, then maybe a Transmitter in a passive. That'd probably be the best way to go. When it comes to embellishments, this early in the season, you're just going to want to craft yourself a Vagabond's Bounding Baton. This is a 2-handed weapon. It's at 636, so it's probably above any weapon you'd normally get. Obviously, if you already have a mythic tier weapon in your vault, 636, it can go all the way up to like 639, so it can go higher than this thing. So you may not craft it in that case if you got super lucky and you're killing mythic bosses. But this thing is just like generally good. The embellishment on it is, it's okay. It's not like crazy or anything, but it is the strongest embellishment. We can also double the effect of this by using the Riding Armor Banding. So you just put this on another piece of armor, and then you get like the 2 embellished part of this. But I think later in the season, we're going to just want to have like a boss one-hander, probably the one-hander off the last boss. And then we're going to want to use the offhand for the embellishment, and then use the Riding Armor Banding on a different piece to double that. That way we can get more damage, because our one-hander will be able to go all the way up to 639. But I think for like 99.99999 repeating percent of players, just crafting the baton is probably going to be the way to go. So just send that. It is 90 crest though, and they are the Gilded Crest, the highest tier. So that is kind of a tough pill to swallow. So definitely go with the 2 spark option, right? The 2-hander. That's going to get you the best bang for your buck. Because otherwise, if you did like a 1-hander and an offhand, you'd have to have double that, right? Double the amount of crest. That's not going to be efficient for you anymore. If you already have a great weapon, then obviously you can go with like other embellishments, something like the Duskweave lining, just more versatility. But I'll be honest with you, the embellishments this tier aren't very strong as of the time I'm recording this, so they're all kind of mid, to be honest. But yeah, for gear, I mean, we just want like as much haste as we can get, right? So obviously the rare neck is insane because it's super high haste and it gives us a verse proc, so that's just like a really awesome neck. Yeah, we just want to grab just haste. If the gear has haste on it, it's probably our Abyss. And obviously Spy Masters is what we want most, and just a really high M level weapon, whether it's from the raid, whether it's from crafting it. 99% of people are going to craft their weapon, so, you know, just do that. But as always, use whatever is going to be the biggest upgrade for you, so just sim your character. All right, let's talk a little bit more about the rotation, and in this case, I'm actually going to ignore my Combustion and ignore my Shifting Power, because I just want to talk about what you'd be doing, like, in between, right, whenever you're not using your cooldowns. So we don't want to be sitting on full charges. We actually want to spend them kind of aggressively. If Combustion's coming up soon, then we want to pool maybe like 1 or 2 Fire Blast for that Combustion. I would say like 1 if you have Glorious Incandescence, you can probably get away with that. You'd have 1 Phoenix Flame if you have the Phoenix Reborn buff coming soon, the Flamestrike, right? So you can kind of think of those 2 buffs as like having additional charge. We want to use our guaranteed crit spells as like a double whammy. So like if I'm going to just hit the target dummy without using Combustion here, I'm going to send my Phoenix Flame and my Fire Blast at the same time because that's going to guarantee a crit, okay? I don't want to just send 1 because if I send 1 and then I do like a Fireball, I'm opening myself up to getting a non-crit and then losing my hot streak, right? So basically we're going to send the hot streak afterwards and see what we get, and then we can react accordingly. So, you know, right here, I would just send these 2 back to back, right? If I was not pressing my Combustion anytime soon, I could just keep going back to back. Whenever we get down to the point where we're on our last Phoenix Flame, we're going to want to do the Pyro Fishing stuff. So like Fireball into Pyroblast at the same time. So whenever we cast a Fireball into Pyroblast, both spells are going to travel at the same time for my character. And then I have a double chance to crit, right? So because both of these hit at the same time, there's a grace period when these spells hit. So if one of them crits, then I will get a Heating Up, regardless of which one hit quote unquote first, because they're basically hitting at the same time, right? So again, you're just doing like a double whammy. If you have 2 of these available, you can send them both at the same time. The way that we spend these is just kind of aggressively, unless there's a reason for us not to, unless Combustion is coming up soon. That is kind of how we want to do it. We just want to blow through them, especially when Shifting Power is coming up soon. If Shifting Power is about to come up, we want to spend everything, get it all out as quickly as we possibly can. And then obviously if you don't have these resources available and you don't have Shifting Power, you don't have Combustion, then, you know, you just go back to casting Fireballs as your filler. But you're just still trying to generate the hot streak. So like if I'm casting Fireball, let's say, and I have a Heating Up, right, I want to make sure I convert that into a hot streak. I do want to point out, I have this rotation tracker down here, and whenever I was recording this, I actually noticed it wasn't properly detecting all of my Pyroblasts. So I'm going to point that out later. But for the most part, you can look down here to see which button I'm pressing in which order. Okay, let's talk about the opener again. I used my Treacherous Transmitter before the pull. As you can see, I already have it primed with 2 jumps. Getting the jump before the pull is like this, because you just need to do 1 jump and you activate it. But yeah, so before this all happens, right, we still have time on the pull timer here. I'm going to get out my mirror images. I'm going to get my Molten Barrier up. And then I'm going to start pre-casting a Pyroblast, and I'm queuing a Phoenix Flame from it. Like right so that it hits as the timer hits 0, okay? So like right here, this is about right with my distance, because there's a travel time, obviously. So I start casting a little bit beforehand. And then, so both of these spells are going to go off right here. You'll see them both leave my hands. Both the Phoenix Flame and the Pyroblast come out. Now, the next step depends on what happens here, okay? So in most cases, you're just going to get a Heating Up, because only one of these is going to crit. However, if you get lucky and they both crit, then you don't need to do a Fire Blast. We'll talk about that in just a second. You won't need to do that because you already have a hot streak, right? So like right here, you're always going to be hardcasting a Fireball next, unless the target's like below 30%, which would be weird because this is the pull, right? But anyways, so yeah, hardcasting a Fireball. And then as this Fireball is going to end, I'm going to use Combustion and Fire Blast at the same time. This little red line on my bar is telling me basically like where I should be doing it. So, you know, just make sure that you're doing about here. I have a lot of experience with this, so I'll do a little later. But Yeah, basically, I'm going to use a Fire Blast here with my Combustion. That way I have Hot Streak. That way I am able to queue an instant cast Pyroblast from this cast right here. So you're going to see it happen right here. I activate Combustion and Fire Blast at the same time. Okay, so I have a Hot Streak here. Even though my UI doesn't show it yet, I do have a Hot Streak. And I'm going to queue this Pyroblast from the Fireball cast, okay? These two go off at the same time. So right here, this is a Fireball and a Pyroblast, okay? Both of these are going to crit. All right, so they both crit. That gives me a Hot Streak again, so I can spin another Pyroblast. I spin the Pyroblast right here. As you can see, I still have 2 Fire Blast charges, so this is actually 2 Pyroblasts. I don't know why it's only showing 1, but yeah, there's 2 there. And anyways, so what I'm going to do next is basically alternate between these two. I want to make sure that I don't cap out on Fire Blast, though. That's the one I'm more concerned about, not having cap out. So I am going to send a Fire Blast here. I just want to basically exhaust my Fire Blasts, okay? The only reason why you'd use a Phoenix Flame over the Fire Blast is if the Phoenix Flame has the Flamestrike buff, which will be indicated on my UI by like a little glow around the square, okay? But anyways, it's kind of good to alternate them, though, sometimes, just because it can let you maybe get like 1 extra Pyroblast in your Combustion if you have like a Fire Blast at the very end. But that's not super important to worry about. Just make sure that you don't overcap on either of these. So anyways, I'm using Forgy's bar, but I've kind of customized it. So this is his Combustion bar. You also see a icon that shows up over my Hot Streak. That's also Forgy's Weakaura's. He's got really awesome Fire Weakauras. So definitely go check out his UI if you want. I've also pulled him into the Luxthos UI, so I don't own any of this. This is all just other people's work, but I put it together and made it look the way I want it to look. So if you want mine, you know, I can just share it in the description if you just want to download it there, but just want to make sure the right people get credit for it, right? But anyways, so in the Combustion, right, I'm just alternating basically. I'm just trying to spin all my Fire Blasts in Phoenix Flames. And obviously, if I get like Glorious Incandescence, all that stuff, it's going to give me returns here. So I just used a Glorious Incandescence. So you're going to see my Fire Blast charges come back here in just a second. See that? Right there. Boom. See they're back? So it's very easy to overcap on Fire Blast. You saw how I had 0, and now I have 2 instantly. Yeah. So that's why you want to make sure you slam that Fire Blast so that you don't overcap. It is very easy to overcap just out of the blue. So yeah, be aggressive. Be aggressive about spending that. That way you have a lot more to gain whenever you proc the extra ones. Anyway, so we're coming up on the end of Combustion here. So as my Combustion is winding down, what's going to happen here is Combustion will end. That's indicated by Forgy's little Weakaura here that tells you 0. It tells you it's about to end whenever it glows. That tells me I'm about to enter Hyperthermia. So Hyperthermia is next, and I will be able to get like 1 last Pyroblast off. Usually I'll just try the Phoenix Flame in there if I have one, but you know, I'm basically going to have my Hyperthermia start right now. So you'll see it pop up. Okay, so in Hyperthermia, remember, you have instant cast Pyroblast that always crit and Flamestrike, obviously. But they're not Hot Streak. They're not guaranteed to be Hot Streak, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pay attention to 2 things. 1, I'm making sure I don't cap out on Fire Blast, okay? Which we're not going to do that because we don't even have one right now. And 2, I want to make sure I keep my Field of Burn, okay? I want to carry this over. So I might use like 1 Fire Blast in here to convert that heating up into a Hot Streak during my Hyperthermia just to keep that up. So anyways, we're just going to spam Pyroblast here. Whenever you do that, it would always be like right here where you have just a heating up, you would convert this. Okay, that's how you'd want to do it. So you see I get 2 in a row there. That was because I did it late. I want to make sure I have as much Field of Burn time as possible. And then now we're exiting Hyperthermia. So this is the last cast we can use in the Hyperthermia. So yeah, at the end of this Hyperthermia, I get 1 last Power Blast off here, which gives me a heating up. And then right here, what I'd want to do is use 1 Phoenix Flame. Because that way I could use that last charge, get a Hot Streak, spin the Hot Streak, and then after I spin it, I want to immediately Shifting Power because my Combustion is on cooldown. We got plenty of time for that thing. Also, I have no Fire Blast, so that's what I would do next here is just use Shifting Power, use 1 Fire Blast during the Shifting Power to maintain Field of Burn, and also to avoid Fire Blast from getting capped, and that is the general idea. Okay, so here's the Shifting Power coming out, and yeah, we are going to use one of these Fire Blasts during the Shifting Power, just so we don't overcap, because it's really easy to overcap. Remember, Shifting Power is giving you cooldown reduction here. You also have TA, which is also going to randomly give you a proc of Fire Blast as well. So just make sure that you have enough room for all the Fire Blasts you're getting back. So right now, my Combustion is 16 seconds out, so we're just going to spin kind of aggressively, but we want to end up being able to enter this Combustion with Fire Blast and Phoenix Flame. At least 1 of each if we have the buffs ready, the Glorious Incandescence, the Flamestrike. But if we don't have the buffs, then 2 is probably the best way to enter this here. And so remember, double whammies, right? I'm using these in pairs. So Phoenix Flame, Fire Blast, and then a Hot Streak. I don't want to just send one. If I just send one, then there's a chance that I don't crit, and I don't want to take that chance. So that would waste my heating up, right? So right here, Glorious Incandescence is ready. So I'm just going to go for the Fire Blast because I know I'm going to get one back anyways. So we'll send another pair right here. So yeah, Combustion's about to come up, and I have Fire Blast here at 2 charges. And by the way, you would probably want to send this Fire Blast, okay? Because I'm going to include this mistake just so I can show you like what not to do. It's like a cautionary tale. So watch what happens to this Fire Blast. Out of nowhere, boom, capped, okay? See, it's so easy to overcap on Fire Blast if you aren't like aggressively spinning. I could have refreshed the field of burn. I could have used the 1 Fire Blast there. I would probably want to follow it up with another guaranteed crit, so I might use a second Fire Blast during the Fireball and just save the Hot Streak, right? It's kind of an awkward thing, awkward situation, because I don't want to spin the Hot Streak that I get from this because I want to save it for Combustion. But yeah, that's what I would want to do here. Okay, so right here, my Combustion is ready to go, and I'm currently casting a Fireball, and I have a Hot Streak ready, so I don't need to Fire Blast, remember. We would just be able to cue that Pyroblast with the Fireball ending in Combustion, so we'll go ahead and go for that. And I just want to make sure my Fire Blast don't overcap, so I send that first, but now I want to use the Flamestrike Phoenix Flame, so just get those out, right? And I just had 1 to use there, and just alternating again, just, you know, keeping an eye on my procs. I did have a Glorious Incandescence there, so I know a bunch of Fire Blasts are coming back here in just a moment. So I just spend 1 Phoenix Flame as I'm waiting, and I'll try to get that last Power Blast in there at the very end, both of them. And now I have my Hyperthermia again. I'm just spinning Hyperthermia. Hyperthermia ends, and then this would be a Phoenix Flame. And then we would just be back into our rotation outside of Combustion. So yeah, as Hyperthermia ends, I go ahead and send the Phoenix Flame, right? And again, we have the double whammy ready, so we can go ahead and cue that up after this Pyroblast. So I want to use this Glorious Incandescence. I don't want it to be wasted. I do have a Brilliant Power that's on the way soon, because I'm at 4 Spellfire Spheres. I want to use this Glorious Incandescence as soon as possible. So I'm going to send the Phoenix Flame with the Fire Blast here together. And then right here, I would cue a Fireball into a Pyroblast. Since I'm low on charges, I'm kind of low on resources. I just want to do a little Pyro fishing so that both of those spells hit at the same time. And I have 2 chances to get a heating up instead of just the 1. Okay, let's talk about AoE. So in AoE, you just replace Pyroblast with Flamestrike. It's that simple. You'll also use Scorch leading into Combustion anytime you're about to use Combustion, so keep that in mind, that it won't be Fireball, it'll be Scorch. Also in AoE, your Fireball sucks. Okay, so you're always looking for a target to Scorch that's like below 30%. If you can find one, try to always be Scorching. Try not to be casting Fireballs. Fireballs are unfortunately something you will have to cast sometimes. Hardcasting Flamestrike isn't really a thing unless you're playing SKB, so we're not doing that. But anyway, so I'm going to use my mirror images here, and I'm going to send out a Phoenix Flame, and I'm going to use my Treacherous Transmitter to get this thing ready, or at least I should. And then so right here, I'm going to begin casting the Scorch, and during the Scorch cast, I'm going to Combustion, Fire Blast, and immediately throw out a Flamestrike. So the Flamestrike, by the way, is going to go where my mouse is, okay? Because I'm using an @cursor macro, which is something you need to use. You need to use an @cursor macro, okay? There is no using the green reticle as Flamestrike. You will lose infinite damage doing that. Use the macro in the description below, or go to the Wowhead guide, use the macro from there. Do not use the green reticle. Okay, anyways, Combustion's going to end here. I'm going to Fire Blast and use a Flamestrike. So right here, the Flamestrike is going to go where my mouse is, right? And I'm going to send out the 2 Flamestrikes here, and I'm trying to kind of alternate, so you'll see me like getting the Majesty of the Phoenix buff. Since I have the extra Fire Blast, I'm just trying to like make use of this buff, so I'll do like a Phoenix Flame, Flamestrike, Fire Blast, Flamestrike, Phoenix Flame, Flamestrike, Fire Blast, Flamestrike, back and forth. That way I'm always using the Majesty of the Phoenix, but it's not something you would like hold your Phoenix Flames for. I'm just doing this because I have extra Fire Blast right now, right? So it's just something to do if you have that extra, but you will see here whenever I get to Burden, I make sure that I have that buff for Burden. So anyways, right here I get Burden at Power, right? This is ready. So next thing I'm going to do is send a Phoenix Flame, right? That way I get the Majesty of the Phoenix and I activate my Hot Streak. So right here, Phoenix Flame comes out. So this one's going to be a juicer because we have Majesty of the Phoenix. We got Burden at Power, 60%, 20% on this one if I remember correctly. So yeah, anyways, big damage on this Flamestrike. So anyways, right here, my Combustion's about to end, and I don't really have time to cast a Scorch. So probably the best thing for me to use right here in this exact moment would be like a Dragon's Breath. It's just kind of like an awkward extra GCD. But anyways, what's going to happen next is Hyperthermia, and it's basically more of the same. All right, so I skipped ahead here because I wanted to find the spot where I have just like nothing available, right? So I'm completely cashed out. I already used my Shifting Power. You know, I'm not in hyperthermia. I'm just like using all my resources till I have none. Combustion's a ways out. So this is where I would really, really love to have a target to Scorch, okay? If I could find a target to Scorch, that would be huge damage for me. But since I'm hitting the dummies, all of them are capped out on health, so I can't do that. So I'm just going to cast Fireballs. But this is just like a bit unfortunate. I would definitely want to have a target there, though. And obviously, if you get a heating up, so like it's going to feel really rare without pyrotechnics. But if you get a heating up, you need to make sure you convert that into a hot streak. Do not cast another Fireball and waste it, all right? You'll be very sad if you do that, because they are few and far between as this build. All right, you rely on finding the low health targets to Scorch. It's very important that you're Scorch sniping. The best way to do it, in my opinion, is to have a mouse over macro. You put your mouse over the mob that's about to hit 30%. You press the button, it focuses that mob, and then you have a Scorch macro that attacks your focus target. That way I can target whatever I want, and I can be scorching this other target, right? You can do it that way, or you can just target whatever's lowest, okay? But the point is that you need to be hitting the targets that are below 30%. It's super important. This is, by the way, important in single target too. Use Scorch below 30%. But in AOE, it'll feel way worse because you don't have pyrotechnics, so make sure you find those Scorch targets. But yeah, I'm just basically biding my time. I'm not going to do like anything here unless I get a proc. So I'm like crossing my fingers, praying that I get a Combustion proc or that I get a Hyperthermia proc. The RNG gods tell me no. Okay, so I just want to show another example of Combustion. So like at the end of this Combustion, I see that like I'm going to have basically nothing left here. So I'm actually going to Scorch right here, get a Scorch off, and then use that last Fire Blast right here. And that leads me into Hyperthermia. So now I'll use the Hyperthermia, right? And I do have a Fire Blast here, so I'm going to carry over this Field of Burn. And then so as this ends, I would be back in like Fireball land, which I hate being in, right? After I spin these two. So since everything's on cooldown, I'm just going to go ahead and send the Phoenix Flame and the Fire Blast together and just get those out of the way, and then it would just be Fireball time. So Mythic Plus, you're going to find that like this situation happens a lot less because pulls will be shorter and you'll have like time between pulls. So you don't necessarily end up dry like this a lot. But if you do end up dry, like you'll pretty much just cast a bunch of Fireballs, and it really does feel very often like you just are wasting your time casting these Fireballs, right? So this is, I'm just showing this just to like show the just the hopeless nature of it all. It just feels like nothing is happening during the Fireball time. But again, find that time for Scorch, right? Look for targets to Scorch. That's going to be the better thing for you. And just pray to God that you get like a Hyperthermia proc, right? And that is from a hot streak. So you do have to get a hot streak for that to happen. Be aggressively spending. Remember all the rules from before. Remember that we always spell queue into a Combustion, right? Either that's with a Fireball or a Scorch. Remember that you're flame striking at 5 targets. And remember that you're always looking for a target to execute with Scorch, right? Scorch execute is just free hot streaks. So we love that. So yeah, I just want to close this by just saying that like overall, Fire Mage is honestly really good. I'm surprised at how good, honestly, all the mage specs are, right? Frost, Fire, Arcane, they're all really, really good right now. I think that Arcane is more meta just because it was better initially. Now that it's been nerfed a couple times and Fire's been buffed a couple times, I think it'll take a little bit for it to catch on. But I definitely think for a lot of people, especially people who are doing the raid like as it gets nerfed later down the line, as we get like our power increases, I think you'll see a lot more people playing Fire. In a like cutting edge progression setting, Arcane is just way too good because of the strong execute and having the execute be so important on a lot of those fights. So like I definitely think Arcane is like probably the most correct rating spec, but I think that Fire has the potential to be the best rating spec. Obviously it's fight dependent though, right? If you're looking at a fight like Brood Twister, it's probably Frost. If you're looking at anything single target, it's probably Arcane, but honestly anything that has even a slight amount of cleave, Fire is probably going to be the best. And even in single target, Fire might just be the best because you can probably play it easier than Arcane. Like it's super mobile, super easy, very little chance of death. You're just like more able to deal with mistakes because you've got Cauterize. So I recommend that you definitely try out Fire Mage if you haven't already picked it up. Hopefully this video helps you to learn it and you can get it down. But yeah, Mage overall is just fantastic right now. So all 3 specs are banging. Definitely go check out my Arcane video if you want to learn how to play Sunfury Arcane. It's very fun as well. Has a lot of the same themes as Sunfury Fire, although the execution is way more about like remembering certain sequences as opposed to just reacting to certain things. So yeah, in closing, I just want to say, you know, these videos obviously take a lot of time to put together. If you reach the end, I would really appreciate it if you clicked that like button and also subscribe to the channel, because I have more content coming out soon that you'll definitely want to check out. And that way you'll be notified. If you ring that little notification bell, you'll be notified whenever the next video comes out. That would be greatly appreciated. And as always, hopefully I'll see you in the next one.